Hello and welcome to Software Architecture course. Now we will learn design patterns, basically which models the interactions, which is basically the behavior. Let's look at the next pattern, which is the visitor pattern. In the case of a visitor pattern, let's look at what we require or why we need a visitor pattern. Here, similar types of operations need to be performed on objects of different types. Now, these objects of different types are actually grouped in a structure, basically a collection of or a more complex structure on which similar operations need to be performed, or maybe several distinct or unrelated operations need to be performed on the structure. It may be necessary to add new operations later on, and that should not really impact the structure again. Example is that a graph structure, a complex graph structure on which different graph traversal algorithms need to be implemented. Compiler. So compiler needs to generate the machine code, and for that compiler uses this visitor pattern. Generate different types of reports on a given structure. So there is a structure containing the data on that by visiting different parts of the structure, generate different types of report. Then calculate different types of pricing of various items that are purchased in an online shopping and by visiting the shopping cart. These are all different types of examples where you can use visitor pattern. So let's look at an example of basically calculating the prices here. So let's look at this complex class diagram more carefully. At the top there is this interface, which is the visitor interface, and there is another interface called visitable interface. So visitor interface has methods like visit. So visit method is the one that's going to visit a visitable object, and this visitable object which can be visited, it has a method called accept. So it accepts a particular visitor and it can reveal its state after the visit. Now let's look at how different types of pricing can be calculated, and that's quite an elegant way to handle that. So what are those visitable objects? These are, in the example of shopping, online shopping, these are different types of products. For example, book, fruit, then pet, all of which can be bought and for which the price can be calculated. So book has a price, pet also has a price, and fruit also has a price. Now these prices are all different. For example, book has a price, but pet is calculated based on the unit price. One can buy multiple pets of the same type, so there could be a unit price, and then the final price would be obviously number of a number of pets that are bought. Fruit could be the price of the fruit can be based on, let's say, price per kilogram. So what happens is that all of them actually implement this accept method, in which it accepts a visitor v. So what happens is that when it accepts a visitor, then it invokes the visitor's visit method and passes its own argument. So as I said, the visitor pattern, the name suggests that the visitor visits certain object. So in this case, this visitor visits this object, and this is how it visits. So this accept method of a visitable class calls the visitor to visit itself. So this is very important. It calls the visitor to visit itself. So which is why it says v.visit this. In this example, the visit method returns a number which is a final price. Now there is a shopping cart here. That shopping cart has this visitable, and my application would be using the shopping cart. Let us see what is happening here. So let us look at this visit method, like visiting a fruit or visiting a book or visiting a pet. For each of these visitable type, there will be different methods. Like this is going to visit the fruit, this is going to visit the book, and this is going to visit the pet. So let's look at this. Public int visit book, and look at the code inside. What's happening is that it is checking if the book price is greater than 50, then it is adding some discount here. So this new cost is some discounted cost, or else the cost is equal to book price. In case of fruit, it is simply computing fruit per kg into the weight, and it gives a cost. In case of pet, it is basically computing the unit price multiplied by the number of units, and then it's adding a tax onto it. So these three are three different types of price calculation. The interesting part is that this logic of giving a discount to book is not associated with a book, or adding tax while calculating the price for pet is not here. That's because these logic might change, and whenever these things change, it should not impact the pet, book or fruit. They should remain the same. It would still give those unit prices, but the final price calculation should be here, which is completely outside these three classes, so that whenever you want to change the price calculation logic, you can change it here, and that will never impact these visitable class. So in this case, this visitor declares the visit operation for all the types of concrete visitable classes. There are three concrete classes here: fruit, book and pet, which is why there are three such visit methods. Now, for all the visitable classes, it implements a specific activity. In this case, it is computing a price calculation. If you want to do something else on these visitable classes, you need to create another visitor class. Now this is the object structure. Essentially, this object structure would have all these items that are actually bought. So this is the complex structure. So this complex structure has a set of fruits, books and pets, and this will be visited by the visitor. So this is completely another class, which basically a collection of visitable objects, and it typically offers mechanisms to iterate over the list of visitable elements. So let's look at the usage here. So here this new shopping cart is there, and then new items are being bought, like a new book, 2 books, 2 different fruits, and a pet. And then visitor price calculator, I'm creating a shopping cart visitor, and then I'm iterating for each of these visitable item that has been purchased and put in the shopping cart. Item.accept method is called, which will in turn basically call this visitor's visit method, pricing calculator dot visit. That will in turn apply the pricing calculation logic and will essentially get the final value. So finally this is getting accumulated. Item.get state after visit will return the latest price, and then this will be accumulated, and this sum will be the total cost. So at the end of this, you will get the total cost of all these items. So this is the main part here. What are the consequences? It's basically offers a flexible design for adding a different new visitors, and it extends the functionality without really changing the existing code. So the problem is that if there is a new visitable class, say for example electronic item, that's added, all the implemented visitors need to be modified. So because we need to add the fourth visit method for electronic item, and that will impact the interface visitor, and then all other concrete visitors must implement this even if they are not interested in electronic item. So then the separation between visitor and visitable needs to be revisited again. So visitors actually are dependent on visitable. In this case, if you add a new visitable class, the visitor is impacted. But visitable, which is in this example a new electronic item, that will not be dependent on the visitor. So visitable are decoupled from visitors. Now part of this dependency problem can be solved using reflection mechanism, but it has a performance cost. I said earlier, reflections are very easy and very elegant way to actually implement this segregation and level of indirection. It's a very elegant way to reduce coupling, but it has a cost, which is the performance cost. Let's look at the same visitor example with a reflection pattern. Suppose we need to add a new visitable class, electronic item, in our structure. Make the visitor as abstract class and create one visit method instead of many visit. Just create one. So use the reflection mechanism to get the exact concrete class of V. In this case, suppose it's electronic item. Use reflection to check if there is any method in the concrete visitor class that implements this visit method. If so, it can call this method, or else it executes a default visit method. So what's happening is that it uses a reflection on this visitable object to basically see the type, and then using that information it again uses a reflection to check in the concrete visitor class if there is any concrete visitor class which can implement this particular electronic items pricing calculation logic. If so, that will be called, that particular concrete visitor will be called. Otherwise it will basically invoke a default visit method. So this is one way by which you can use reflection mechanism and then reduce the number of visit methods. Let's again look at the visitor pattern and the composite pattern side by side. Visitor pattern and composite pattern can be used together. Basically the object structure is the composite structure, so therefore the composite pattern, which is a structural pattern, basically can be used to define the object structure. In this example, the shopping cart and its parts could be those composite pattern. In the implementation of the accept method of the composite object, the object method of the components can be invoked in a recursive manner. So if a particular object structure has a set of component objects and all of them basically, and if the entire thing follows a composite design patterns approach, then by calling an accept method on the composite object, that will in return will call all the component objects inside this complex object, and then for all these component objects their accept methods will be called. What is the difference between visitor and iterator then? Both are basically traversing the object structure, but the main difference is that iterator works on the collection. It usually iterates it over the same type of objects, but the visitors can actually visit different types of object. And in this example, like if the shopping cart is a structure, it has got book, shop, book, fish, and the electronic item. These are all three different types. So visitor is more complex. Here the visitor defines the operations that need to be performed on this visitable object. However, iterator is simply used to iterate through the objects. It does not do anything else. Now the operations are basically defined by the client itself. With this we conclude. We'll continue with other behavioral patterns in the next class.